Welcome to Teaching Liberty. My name is Stephanie Edmonds, and I am excited to bring to you a two-part conversation with Aimee, an on-the-ground reporter from New York City who really started posting content during the mandates in New York City and has been covering that issue as well as many others over the past few years. I've had the chance to see her in action, and of course, I follow her work online. I encourage you to as well. You can find her on Substack at No One You Know, as well as on YouTube at NYC for Yourself. And so on the Substack, she does her reporting and analysis, whereas on her YouTube channel, she live streams and does just unfiltered. You can get a window into actually what is happening. So, again, I highly encourage you to follow her on those two platforms and get ready for an amazing conversation. I broke it down into two parts because we went kind of long and we talked about two separate issues. So, in part one, we cover all of the latest in the mandates in New York City, the legal challenges, and what's going on concerning those and the interesting developments there. And then in part two, which I've linked in the description down below, we talk about Aimee's coverage of the Palestinian protests movement. And of course, there were some pro Israeli protests as well. But really, what we talk about is the development and different phases of that Palestinian protest movement and how it's developed over the past 2 months. She breaks it down into three phases and really gives us reporting and analysis you're not going to see anywhere else. The common theme through both of these parts is just that. The reporting from on the ground, once it gets filtered up through the different talking heads and all their agendas and gets put through our TV screens or our phones, whatever, even on these independent media channels, right? There is a disconnect between what is actually happening on the street and the conversation that is happening online and in the culture. And that's why it is so important for us to have sources that are actually on the ground who you can talk to and see firsthand. And so that's why I'm so excited for this two-part series. Make sure you hit that like button. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel and let me know in those comments down below what you think. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first part of this conversation with Aimee.
We haven't actually, I don't think, ever met in person. Oh, no, we did. We met at the Capitol. I'm pretty sure one time when I was up there. I'm pretty sure I saw you at the very least.
I've seen you at lots of protests.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, I definitely think that we've seen each other doing our thing out there.
We've seen each other, but usually you're shooting or you're speaking or you're doing something and I'm live streaming or,
right. Exactly. Listen, we'll have to make make a thing of it next time we're out there to actually make sure we meet each other, take a little selfie or something together. But again, I love your work. I know that you're like a real person, really out here doing your thing. So thank you so much for coming on here and giving us an update. Especially, I'm kind of interested because you cover my lawsuit that I'm part of, and you probably know more about it than me because I've been really bad about keeping up with that. So we're going to cover that. Then you've been covering also the protests, the rallies, everything going on with the Palestine and some Israel as well, kind of rallies in New York City. And then I thought we would talk 2024 elections, what you're seeing both in terms of local, state, and presidential, maybe any predictions you have for us. It's always fun to get little clips on those types of things. So thank you so much, Aimee. I guess just open up by telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this work, why you're so dedicated to it.
Well, thanks for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate the fact that you have been doing this podcast and been doing a lot of talking to the media a lot about what happened with New Yorkers under the mandates, and which obviously was your situation. And I think one of the reasons that I started doing a lot of this reporting is that I saw a real disconnect between what I saw happening around me and in real life, right, in New York City, and the way I saw it presented or misrepresented in the media, right? And so, for example, people like you who came under the DOE mandate and lost your job were, I felt, really cut out of the media conversation, cut out of the public conversation, and often really misrepresented and vilified. So you actually had more engagement with major media, I think, than a lot of people in that situation did. And I don't know how you pulled that off, but.
So you know what it was? I think it was because super early on, basically nobody would talk to the media. It was like me and Rachel and Michael Caine. And so they were reaching out, especially it started off with like CBS and ABC, kind of these like local affiliates of them. And then it was becoming a national story. And so when these national outlets are looking for them, there was only a couple of interviews out there. And they actually had called my sister, like looking for me. It was really hard to get people. And I was even trying to pass them off to people. I was like trying to look for people, call for people. And it's just really hard in the beginning because people thought that they were going to get their jobs back and they didn't really want to put their names and their neck on the line out there like that yet,
right.
Unfortunately.
Right. Well, and I think there was a lot of rhetoric that was always became a frame for presenting people in your situation, rhetoric about how you were anti-vaxxers, and there was all kinds of negative framing around it.
Right, yes.
People didn't want to engage with that. But yeah, so I started the YouTube channel that I do, NYC for Yourself. I guess it was the summer of 2021. It was when the Key to NYC mandate came out. So that was the mandate that barred people from going into restaurants and gyms and entertainment venues if they couldn't present proof of vaccination. So I came out and I started seeing, checking out some of the protests that were going on over that. Remember that big concert in Central Park?
Oh yeah, where it got rained out or something like that. Yes.
Yeah. I was like, what's going to happen there? Like, this is supposed to be the big reopening of the city. Everybody got vaccinated, and that was like the first major event where people lined up and showed their, vaccination cards to get into an event. And there were people lined up down, blocks down Central Park.
It was the cool thing to do. Go show your card. I got,
they got all these famous people, right? But there was a protest there. Freedom Rally was there protesting, and bunch of people. I had not seen this group before. I didn't know anything about it, but I was there and I was taking pictures. It's something that I've done for I've photographed a lot of different protests over the years. And because photography is something that I do. So I was there photographing, and I started kind of following what was going on with that movement. And I was like, this really deserves some real coverage. And there were a couple other people covering it. Leroy Press did really like wall-to-wall coverage in that early phase, I think. But I started coming out and covering those protests and other things happening in New York City. I wanted to just give it a shot and see what, how it would go on YouTube, covering, events where people were engaged with, public policy, public activities.
It looks like these are a lot of your early videos right here from like 2 years ago. You got Joe Rose. And so definitely go check this out, guys. Go check out all her old stuff. I mean, you're probably one of the only people that has this footage. Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah, some of it. Some of it, that's definitely true. But so I started doing that. The answer to the question, how would it go covering this stuff on YouTube? The answer is not well. The algorithm has not liked me. I've had problems here and there. It's I also have a Rumble channel with the same name because there have been occasions where I can't keep something up on YouTube that I live streamed or an interview that I did because somebody at that who was speaking or who talked to me in an interview said something that is unacceptable to YouTube. So I have that on Rumble, right? And I feel strongly that, I want to have normal, honest conversations with people about what they think, and I want to be able to show people real public events as they happen. And I don't want to. I'm opposed to censorship. I don't want to cater to some sort of censorship framework. So I don't. I don't try to tailor my coverage to what YouTube will accept. I have another outlet if there's something that's not acceptable to YouTube, but. In any case, so I was doing the reporting for the YouTube channel, and I really felt that what was happening with people under the mandates deserve more in-depth coverage. So I started the Substack, which is called Know When You Know, and I started a podcast on that Substack, which is the New York Mandate Podcast. And every episode, I have talked to someone different about their experience with the mandate. It's often people who have lost their jobs, sometimes people who were compelled to take a vaccine that they didn't want to take. I've talked to their lawyers, talked to people who, while they were on leave, both public sector workers and private sector workers now. So I've been doing that for quite a while now, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I'm really grateful to those people for talking about their situations and how these policies have affected their lives, your life, right? Because I think that's a fundamental one of the fundamental purposes of journalism is to examine how public policies affect the people who are subject to those policies, right? Whether it's a government policy or a corporate policy, this is what journalism is supposed to do. And I think in the case of the pandemic policies and especially the mandate for vaccination requirements for employment, I think journalism really fell down on that.
Yeah. Well, it's bought and paid for. It's bought and paid for, by very special interests that they don't hide themselves. If you watch the commercials, you can know exactly who they are. Most of them, of course, I'm sure they have their funders who lay a little bit more low. Oh, by the way, I found the video proof that we saw each other at the Capitol when we were chasing Jeffrey Dinowitz.
Oh,
yes.
Right, Ben, yes. Well, no, I think some other people were chasing Jeffrey Dinowitz, and I was chasing him, and I think
I was one of them.
Yeah, I think you actually got in.
I need to release that video. Like, I had so much video, and I was gonna do something with it, and then other things happened. I should release that video like coming up to the next New York legislative session that's gonna be opening up in like a little less than a month, right? So I guess, that's definitely something I want to ask you about as well is, what to expect, what is some legislation, what do you think is going to happen there? But first I want to get into the latest in the lawsuits, because that's one of the big things that you had said that you covered on your Substack here, which I had pulled up. Ooh, it's not there anymore. Here it is. Boom. So on your Substack, and it's specifically you cover the legal stuff in your New York Mandate podcast, NYMP, correct?
So the New York Mandate podcast is actually a podcast. So that's, I have it in video and audio versions, depending on the person. Some people have both, some people just have audio. So those are all interviews with people affected by mandates. But I do this series called Laws and Orders, and it's the New York Mandate Podcast Laws and Orders series, which I started not too long ago.
So it's like a crossover series.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is just to give kind of a quick, I've written a bunch of other articles about the court cases that are longer articles, but this, I'm going to try to maybe do it a little more often to just give people short updates on things that are happening. Because I think this period that we're in right now, that we've been in, starting maybe like a year ago, that'll go through 2024, is a really crucial period for the lawsuits and all of the resolving all the legal questions related to these vaccine mandates, because there are a lot of the cases are going to appeals now.
It's like the boring stuff. It's the boring stuff where people have lost focus. They're trying to like move on with their lives and figure things out. And I'm guilty of that myself. One of the lawsuits that is covered actually in this Substack post and many of your podcasts is one of the cases that I'm part of, which is Broker v. New York City. And so we're a group of about 90 teachers, and New York City is being sued, but also this is directed towards the union and really having to do with the civil service law. And as I there's so much going on. The legal part of things was never my specialty. I'm sort of the making content, taking video, but the legal, following the legal action, I haven't been great at. So I'm super grateful that you've been doing this work and that hopefully you find it interesting, since, it seems like, and also it's like you were a photographer and then you just sort of like were inspired to do this, called to do this. I think that's awesome. So yeah, tell us a little bit about the latest in these lawsuits. And yeah, as we said, the law can be kind of intricate, but I think you do a really good job at bringing it to the people in a way that we can understand.
I try to. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a legal background, but I do find these cases really interesting, and there are hundreds of pages of legal documents that you could read through. I try to look at sort of some of the most important things and summarize that a little bit. But yeah, Broker. So Broker is one of the federal lawsuits that was that had multiple, as you were saying, multiple plaintiffs, that was dismissed by the district court. So there was the Broker case, which was teachers and other Department of Education employees. It was a suit against the Department of Education and the unions and some individuals. And then there's also the I always want to say Gardner case, but that's not correct. The case, the other case that the attorney on Broker, Austin Graff, is working on for firefighters.
It's Garvey.
No, it's not Garvey. It's
not Garvey. Okay.
Garvey's SNY. I'll get to that.
My bad.
Garland. I'm sorry.
Garland. Okay.
Garland is the firefighter case. Broker is the teacher case. both argued by Austin Graff in federal court. Those cases were dismissed and then appealed. So the Broker case just went to appeals and had a head-spinningly fast decision. Some of these cases go to appeals, and New Yorkers for Religious Freedom had oral arguments in a federal appeal in, I think, January. You were there. I saw you there.
It was February 8th of last year. So we're 10 months out from that.
Yeah.
With nothing, not a word.
Yeah. So still waiting for a decision on that or something. Whereas broker, it was like a week later or something, right? They denied the appeal, but they did something interesting. And this is Austin Graff came on the podcast to actually talk about a different topic, but he also commented on the broker decision, and there's his comments are in video in that article that you were showing.
Should we play that clip?
Sure.
Decision did something very interesting, which I wasn't expecting. So the decision dismissed the state claims without prejudice, which means that I believe, and I haven't done the research yet, there's a 6-month window that I have a right to go back to state court on the state claims, and the statute of limitations on those state claims are told, and I go back to my November date when I filed broker, so November 2021. So that duty of fair representation, which is 4 months, is still in play. The Article 78 for a arbitrary and capricious decision, that's still in play. Some of these other things that I have to speak to the clients and see what they want to do. I've kind of let it breathe for the last week, because it was just, I wasn't expecting a decision within 5 days, 6 days. I just was shocked. But they did give me something that I can hold my hat on that says I can go back and still litigate this thing. And some of the language that they used, I don't know whether it was positive or negative towards me. A 12-page decision from the Second Circuit in 6 days meant that they knew what they were going to do. But at the same time, they gave me that one little piece where I can go back to state court. The notwithstanding plaintiff's dogged insistence to the contrary. Is that a positive thing about me, or is that a negative thing about me? I don't know.
All right. So this case has legs, is what he's saying.
Yeah. But what he said a minute after that is that he doesn't think it's going to go to the Supreme Court. What he thinks is that, he has to discuss it with you and all the other plaintiffs and see, where you want to take it. But he seemed to think that, the more likely avenue would be to take these claims to state court. And that was really during the hearing. The judge, it was a panel of 3 judges, and they really kind of hammered him about, like, why aren't you doing this in state court? Why is this a federal claim? He was making a federal claim that you guys were denied due process in the implementation of the mandate. And under that the process for implementing the mandate did not meet the constitutional standard, the federal standard for giving you due process. And the judges came back and said, no, it was good enough. You got enough due process. They told you what they were going to do. They did it. And then if you didn't like it, you could file an Article 78 with the state court, right? And that's good enough by federal.
Could we file
standard.
an Article 78 though?
Well, that was they were saying, like, when that happened, that was your recourse. If you didn't like the results of the process, you could then go and file an Article 78. I think probably
right. And Article 78
limitations is no longer, would allow that. But
right. Well, he said, I guess if you go and file in state court, it does seem like those statutes of limitations go back to November 2021, right when we were hired.
Right.
So
right.
That's interesting.
No, because because of the things that he's done with the case.
Right.
If you had just were starting back then, you would have what was it, 4 months, 6 months to file an Article 78, right? So, but yeah, no, you can he can do that now, and he was making claim. One of the reasons that the unions are defendants in the case is that he was claiming that they colluded with the Department of Education and the city in creating the procedures by which the mandate was implemented, right? And he's saying that under various state laws also, the mandate implementation and the whole process by which that agreement was made, the arbitration process was not, was in violation of state laws. So they kind of left the door open. The judges really left the door open and kind of said, like, hey, why don't you take it to state court?
Yeah.
So maybe that's what you guys will decide to do. I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're talking about it. We're talking about it. I am trying to keep up with those conversations in the emails. But I do want to clarify for anybody who might not be familiar with Article 78. It's basically like a state law in civil service, but it applies specifically to teachers. If you're or it's like all civil servants, is it? And okay. But you have to, I think teachers have to be tenured in order to be able to qualify for an Article 78.
No, an Article 78 is just if you want to challenge an administrative decision, a decision made by a government agency.
Okay, so any civil servant can use this process to challenge a decision. Got it. For some reason, I thought you had to be tenured or it had something to do with tenure for teachers. Because I know for to be qualified for the case that I was in, you had to be a tenured teacher.
I'm not sure why that would be. It might be because it might be because when you're tenured, your contract and state laws, I'm a little fuzzy on where the state laws come into it, but they give you rights to due process that you don't have before you're tenured. So if you're a tenured teacher, I'm not sure, like maybe you're thinking of a 3020A.
Okay. Yes. That is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. If you have a disciplinary action against you, I think you need.
Right. But then they were like, oh, it's non-disciplinary. Like, we're going to fire you for non-disciplinary reasons.
Right. So this is another one of the big legal questions, right? Was it a condition of employment that, the government was allowed to impose, or was it a disciplinary action? And if it was a disciplinary action, were you deprived of your due process rights? These are questions that are involved in a lot of the legal cases. But yeah, so then there's also the Garland case that I was talking about, his other case that's going to appeals, and that just got a hearing date for, I think it's January 9th. I also have it in that newsletter. So that will go through the same process. It might, it's there that the union is different, the agreement is slightly different. All these agreements were kind of similar. They were all kind of based on yours, on the agreement with the teachers, because that was the first, the impact award, the arbitration agreement that was created for the DOE mandate kind of was the template for a lot of the union agreements that came after. But nevertheless, the firefighters union is different. I'm sure their agreement was slightly different, and their union, all of the
it does
things that apply are different. So
it seems like the police and the firefighters and like maybe sanitation, it seems like some of the other agencies had a little bit easier or more wiggle room, or it was like more dependent on who their captain or whatever was, especially the police. It seemed like the police, like their date just kept moving back and kept moving back and kept moving back. So, I mean, like good for them. But at the same time, looking from as a teacher, it's like, dang, we just totally got robbed of everything. So I hope that they're able to crack through, because I do feel like also, though, if one of these cases is able to crack through, that maybe even though ours are slightly different, it might at least, start helping to make a pathway for more of us.
Yeah, well, there are, so there are dozens and dozens of cases in both state court and increasingly in federal court. There are more cases being filed now in federal court. It used to be that Broker and Garland and a couple other cases, a few other cases were the federal cases that I'm aware of, right? There's also a big one that's really interesting that's brought on the grounds that the mandates violate OSHA laws. And that's the one that's being argued by Joe St. George. I don't know if you know about that one. But that's another one of the big federal cases. Nothing has happened in that case for a little while, so I'm waiting to see what will happen next. But there have been bunch of new federal cases. I think that some of the lawyers are trying to spread things around a little bit now between the New York state system and the federal system, because a lot of the New York court cases in the state system that are going into appeals are failing on appeal. They're not winning on appeal. So I think that the lawyers are trying to maybe give the federal system more of a try.
Yeah. Try different judges, different districts, different, like I know from just some of the other stuff I followed with like housing and the environment. I mean, I think for the environment, there's an average of 3 lawsuits filed a day, every single day of the year, something like that. And they're filed all over the place on different grounds. And then, they see which one they can get furthest in the court systems to set different precedents and different policies on the way. So it's so good to hear that these things are going on. It's like, unless you really have your ear to the ground and you're looking to see who's putting in these filings, that you're not going to be able to turn on your TV or even open up your computer and find that on just like your regular feed. You have to seek these things out. So,
well, the other thing is that all of these cases interact.
Okay.
Right? They set precedents for each other. They're citing each other. Another big case that's coming up is the Garvey appeal, right? You mentioned that earlier. I was trying to remember the name of the Garland case. But the Garvey case is the case with 16 sanitation workers. And that was a really pivotal case because they won, right?
I remember people still send me that. And they're like, oh, look, the Supreme Court, they won in the Supreme Court. I'm like, it says New York Supreme Court.
Right.
It's the lowest court in New York, but
yeah, that was, that was really one of the, I have such mixed feelings about how that whole thing went from a media perspective, because I was the only media at that hearing.
Okay.
And I broke that story live when we came out of the hearing. And I interviewed, Chad Lavelia and a bunch of the petitioners who were there. And, he said, Lavelia said, we've defeated the mandate in New York, because the thing that was important about that case is that the judge accepted an argument that the mandate was unconstitutional, right? That it violated equal protection and separation of powers as required by the New York State Constitution, and also that the mandate was arbitrary and capricious. And so he ordered the reinstatement of these 16 petitioners and ordered back pay for them. But what the case also did, what his decision also did, is it invalidated the mandate, and that would have applied to everybody, all city workers, because the mandate was in force at that time. But of course, the city, I think they filed their appeal. It didn't show up in the electronic system until the next day, but I think they filed it later that same day. So we were standing outside the, courtroom, and, the judge had said, like, go back to work tomorrow morning. And Chad Lavelia was like, we have defeated the mandate. And then the next day I saw all the major media report on this. sanitation workers beat the mandate is over, and then all the media went away, and then the appeal put a stay on everything, and they never got their jobs back. They didn't get any back pay. They didn't get anything, right? And they're still waiting. So that was last October.
And try to find the headline on that anywhere.
That's right. And I saw this just the other day with I think they were referring to the DeCapo case, which was also teachers who were denied religious exemptions, right? That was another large case before the same judge as Garvey, actually. But they 10 out of the 16, 17, depending on how you count them, petitioners won that, like were granted what they asked for, but not all petitioners were granted what they wanted, which was to have their exemptions.
Right. Yeah. There were certain people who didn't exhaust all of the administrative remedies, and
yes.
the ones who had actually gotten their jobs back because they got a shot or something like that. But there was like 8 of them, including Michael Caine, who a lot of people can know from Teachers for Choice, who were said, you have your job back, report to work.
I think it was 10. I thought it was 10.
It 10? Okay, 10.
So, yeah.
I don't want to undercut it. My bad.
But yeah, right. So they were supposed to go back to work. This once again, it was like total deja vu. Once again, I'm in a hearing, and the same judge is saying, "Go back to work tomorrow," And but in that case, I want to say in DeCapo, he did deny the constitutional claim, so it wouldn't have had quite as broad implications. And this was after the mandate. So anyway, but the point that I was trying to make is that just recently I saw somebody on the news refer to that case and say, "Oh, and the teachers won and they went back and that's all over." So those teachers did not go back. Those teachers did not get back pay. Neither did the sanitation workers. So everybody's just on ice waiting for all of these appeals. But so the Garvey appeal, all of the papers have finally been filed. There was extension after extension after extension over the summer. And so finally the appeal brief has been filed, the reply, all of that. So that means that sometime soon there should be, I think, a hearing. I think there should be I think there might be a hearing with oral arguments, because I did notice on the documents, on the briefs that were filed for the appeal, there was a request from the city for 15 minutes of argument. And there was a request from Chad Lavelio for 15 minutes also. So maybe we will see oral arguments in a hearing.
Has the city ever made one good argument? I've never even heard them make a good argument.
So I think what's interesting is that there are more and more different arguments being made now, especially since you're seeing more cases in federal court, right? So there are now they're making different sorts of arguments under the US Constitution. Of course, the ones in the New York system are making arguments, based on New York laws, on state laws. But there, I think the attorneys working on these cases are kind of coming at them from all different angles, right? One of the, so I was talking about Chad Lavelio, who was the Garvey lawyer. He's actually joined forces with Sujata Gibson, who has worked on a lot of the other major cases.
But did she just get a win, right? The healthcare workers, right? Didn't they get a win recently, I heard?
Oh, you're talking about the state case. Yeah, yes, because she also had the state mandate case for healthcare workers. And the state tried to have the decision that she won vacated. So she went into court she won that case, then went into court for the appeal, and the lawyer from the state showed up and said, surprise, we're getting rid of the mandate, so we don't have to do all this anymore. Can you just like vacate that lower court decision? And Gibson was like, okay, she basically said in court, like, this is what you do every time. You put some regulations in place that are against the law. We take them to court, we win, then you get rid of the regulations, vacate the decision invalidating them, and we do it all again, right? So they tried to vacate to have the lower court decision vacated, and I think they did fail in doing that.
Oh, so, good. Because I know they did that with the mask mandate. I know one of the moms who sued over the mask mandate, and they won initially, and then it got appealed, or it might have been the school closure one. I can't remember. It was either the mask or the school closure one. They filed. Yeah, I think that they won, and then the state appealed, and then the mandate went away, and then they went back and they got rid of the old decision. Like, they vacated it. It's like, that's so messed up. It's I don't even understand how that's legal, or how these judges doesn't make sense to me. But anything else you want to say to wrap up the section on the mandates and the lawsuits? Any advice to people just for following those things?
Yeah, let me just finish what I was saying about this interesting case that Chad LaValia has.
Oh yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Federal court.
Yes,
it's this case. I haven't really written anything. I haven't written anything about it, but I think there's an article in the Post about it. It's 5 NYPD employees who were on the bomb squad and on I think it's called the Emergency Services Unit. So kind of like elite police, groups. All 5 of these people lost their jobs under the mandate, and he makes a bunch of different claims, constitutional claims. But I thought what was interesting is that one of the claims he's making is a case about fundamental rights, about being denied fundamental rights, and saying. And I want to be careful about how I word this. And
this is the case right
here. Yeah. Because I actually, it's funny. I can't talk in detail about what this lawsuit says, because I'm afraid it would create problems on your channel and the platform that we're on.
All right, well, let's just, that is crazy. Well, let's just say it, because this is recorded, and then I can decide, and I'll either cut this part, and I'll be like, you gotta pay $5 on my website to get this little clip.
I'll write something on this too on my Substack, but basically he argues that it's a fundamental right, that people have a fundamental right to have control over their cellular biology. And right, and that
it sounds pretty fair.
The mandate is infringing on that fundamental right, and fundamental rights being something that that they're not explicitly named in the Constitution, but they're understood, to be like fundamental to being a human being, right? And I think that when I talk to people who got fired under the mandate or put on leave without pay or took a vaccine that they didn't want to take against their will to keep their job, people will often say to me, but this is unconstitutional. This has got to be against the law. And I don't think that when most people say that to me, they mean, it violated my due process. This paperwork just wasn't done right. That's not what they mean. They mean, I have a constitutional right to control what happens to my body. I think that's what most people mean when they say that. I mean, don't you think so?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It definitely is that what they mean. And
Yeah.
I mean, this gets into a whole thing, I think, even about the Bill of Rights. There was actually a debate between the founders or the framers of the Constitution if we should have a Bill of Rights. And there was a whole bunch of people like Jefferson and Madison, I believe, who were like, no, once we get into writing them down, then you're actually giving away your rights to the government. And you can even see today how they debate the amendments as if, well, they just meant this part of the right and not that part of the right. And it's like, no, they meant the whole thing, like everywhere at all times. But yeah, so I certainly think that you're accurate in thinking about it that way. And I think it is important. I mean, the law is, I think that's also the hard thing about understanding the law is they argue all these little intricate things and smart people can just talk in circles and come up with madness. And it's just like, the city's paying them how many hundreds of dollars an hour with my tax money? They're paying them the tax money that I pay to them so that they can fight me. Like, like to use my tax money to pay some drug company to inject me. Like, it's just one big circular, nonsensical, I don't know, you know? And that kind of takes us, I feel like, over to the next topic.
Thanks for checking out part 1 of this conversation. Let me know what you think in those comments down below. And while you're there, make sure you've hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and then head over to part 2 of this conversation, where we go into Aimee's coverage of the pro-Palestinian protest movement. I'll see you over there. And remember, think free, live free, and give all the glory to God.